There comes a point in a big institution when the institution does something wrong that there needs to be a distinction made between the institution and the people who've been running it. And that is what leads to a major high-level resignation. The BBC today stands at one of the lowest points in its modern history. It's not enough to apologise. A letter of regret about what it did to the coverage of Donald Trump, however well phrased, will not restore public trust or repair the damage done when an institution that holds itself to be the national voice is found guilty of distorting the words of an American president and then conceal that fact for 6 months or years. The issue ceases to be one about one documentary. It becomes a question of institutional integrity. The Panorama scandal, in which Donald Trump's speech was deceptively spliced to create a false impression of incitement, is more than an embarrassing lapse of editorial judgment. It is a deliberate manipulation of fact, and the subsequent silence from the BBC's leadership compounds that deceit. Both Tim Davie, the Director General, and Samir Shah, the Chairman, were warned about this last spring. They knew, they waited, and that is the heart of the disgrace, and they should both resign. The BBC is not merely another broadcaster, it is a public trust funded by a compulsory licence fee meant to stand above faction and fashion. Its credibility is its currency. To squander that is to betray the very people who sustain it. The Panorama edit underlined and undermined the BBC's claim to impartiality, not because it erred, but because it covered up the error until the scandal became uncontainable. True accountability demands more than an apology to Parliament's Culture Committee. It requires consequences. The Director General holds the title of Editor-in-Chief. He cannot hide between subordinates or internal reviews. If the BBC expects to rebuild its reputation, the chain of responsibility must end where the authority lies at the top. Tim Davie should resign. His departure alone will not suffice. There must be a reconstitution of the BBC's editorial culture, one that prioritises verification over ideology, transparency over damage limitation. Independent oversight would be strengthened. Internal whistle-blowing must no longer be met with silence. Complaints must be properly handled rather than quietly dropped. When Michael Prescott raised the alarm, his memo was ignored. When I raised an issue, I was ignored. That silence is not bureaucratic inertia, it is moral cowardice. This scandal also raises questions about the BBC's broader editorial judgment, from its handling of Gaza to its perceived political leanings in domestic affairs and its coverage of the war in Ukraine. When Sir Vernon Bogdanor, one of Britain's most respected constitutional thinkers, calls for a resignation, it is not a partisan gesture, it is a constitutional necessity. The BBC is not the plaything of politicians, nor can it act as an unaccountable priesthood of truth. In the end, this crisis may serve a purpose if it forces reform. The BBC must rediscover what made it great: precision, restraint and humility before the facts. It cannot posture as a moral arbiter while failing to meet its own standards of honesty. The future of the BBC will depend on whether it embraces that humility. Its task now is not to defend its reputation, but to earn it back. Line by line, broadcast by broadcast, it starts with a direct apology to Trump and a demonstration of goodwill. That demonstration can only be in the resignation of the top people in the organisation. It begins with leadership taking responsibility, not refuge, and that means that Tim Davie's time is up.